sensation.
Hello and welcome to Matt Vest versus his friends. Today my special guest is Richard Vest.
Again, don't be bothered by the things they say. Only know I wanna feel this way. When there's nothing left for me to say, let's make our change. I'm moving to a new motivation.
Alright, hello! The song that you were listening to is called Start Again by the band Starpool. They're out of Anaheim, California. This song is off their album Living in Translation. It's a good record, one of my favorites. I love some Orange County ska. If you get a chance, you should pick that up. Go check them out. Starpool, pretty good band. All right, like I said, today my guest is Richard Vest. You may recognize that he has the same last name as me. So, Dad, how do we know each other?
I think I'm your father.
You think?
I know I'm your father because you look like me.
Is there something you said you think? So, is there something you want to tell me?
Nothing to tell you.
Okay, because that would be a big surprise at 37.
Yes.
So, how you doing? How are things?
Things are good. I'm progressing, having fun,
Yeah.
learning new things.
Learning new things?
Yes.
Like what? What new thing have you learned recently?
Well, that I did have learned that I can't study as well as I used to when I was younger. So I'm having to work a lot harder on some of my studies. As you know, I'm studying to learn how to be a personal trainer. So the books are a little tougher for me to pick them up. I'm usually picking up by visual.
So you're basically learning that you're getting old. Is that the...
I think I might be getting old someday. I'll have to judge that in another 10 years to see if I'm old.
Awesome. I'm gonna do a little bit more background because people don't know you. Actually, people don't know any of my guests or me. So, what can you tell me about your childhood growing up? What was that like?
Okay, well, I grew up, I was born in 46, so grew up out in the desert, basically, a desert rat, out near Barstow, lived out there. At first I was born in China Lake, then we moved down to Barstow a few years later. So I lived out where we lived out in the country. We could travel, run around as kids and had the whole desert as our playground. We could do anything we want and wasn't overcrowded. We actually had all my cousins right next door and down the street, all over the place, so we were always hanging out together at that time.
What about didn't you have to travel a lot? Because not travel, but move a lot.
Yeah. Well, my father was in the Navy before I was born. He got out, and then he went back in the Navy. I guess I was probably 5 or 6. So, yeah, in the military, you usually live maybe 2 or 3 years in one place, and then you pack up and move. In Barstow, he was not in the service, but he did join the service. Went back into the service, and we moved up to Santa Cruz. That was one of the fun places. I think we only spent a year there, my sister and I and mother, and that was great. Santa Cruz has a beach right there. We kind of had our own private beach for the street there, and we could go down and play in the little lagoon. And from there, let's see, where did we move? I think we moved back down to Southern California a little bit. Then we went up to Salinas, as my father was stationed in Monterey. So we lived in Salinas, and we lived here in San Pedro during my junior high, also say the 5th and 6th grade, and 7th and 8th grade of junior high. And we lived right next to the park, so we walk out the back door. We had our yard, and then we had the park that was quite large, so we played there, played Little League there, played flag football.
Where did you spend high school? What?
High school, first 2 years, freshman and sophomore year was in Salinas. I went to North Salinas High School. I was on the swim team for sports. and we had a small swim team. I mean, there's only 10 of us on the swim team the first couple of years. And then, of course, I moved down here to Southern California, went to Bolsa Grande High School. There we had a pool, and we also had water polo. So when I was here, I played in Garden Grove, Bolsa Grande High School. I was both a swimmer and a water polo player.
What year did you graduate?
I graduated from high school in 1964.
So you pretty much were a teenager, like late 50s, early 60s. So was it like, is it like what it's pictured on, like, in movies and stuff? Was your high school experience like, American Graffiti? Was it?
Actually, yes.
Yeah.
I can remember a time you had American Graffiti. I can remember they had, in that movie, they had a shot of some people running around on a Jeep. I had a friend that had a Jeep, and we piled about 8 or 9 people in that open Jeep driving around.
So you guys didn't have seatbelts, is what you're telling me?
No seatbelts. We barely had our legs inside, and just the weight of people sitting on it kept you from falling out. We also had, the old drive-in where people came up and put your tray in the window and you ordered things. So,
was it as blissful as it seems?
Actually, yes, because people were your friends. You didn't really have to worry about anything. You could trust them. And we just hung out together, traveled, did sports together, did football, flag, just playing around, not high school football. But, and we participated in the sports this is up in North Salinas, where it was really more like American Graffiti. Yeah. When I came down here to Garden Grove and Bolsa Grande, okay, it wasn't quite that way. Now we had friends and we could go and do things, but there's a lot more houses here on top of each other. Even though it's a lot worse now, a lot more now, but it was still, you didn't have the open air where you could just drive half a mile and be away from all the houses like you did in Salinas. Because we could run over to Santa Cruz. Salinas is not that far from Santa Cruz and Monterey Bay and all that.
Be careful. Be careful hitting the couch. Every time you keep hitting it, it's going to make a sound.
Yeah.
Because listeners are like, what is that sound? Why does he keep hitting the sound? So you pretty much grew up in I would say, probably one of the most significant eras of I don't know, especially American existence, like this late 50s and the 60s, and obviously you've lived every moment since then. Like I remember we talked about this once and maybe you can expand on it. What was it like? Because I remember asking you, what was it like to grow up in the time of like civil rights movement? Because you were pretty much in California right when a lot of that was taking place, and you were in high school, and segregation or desegregation was a big issue politically at the time you were in high school in those years, and in the South it was a big issue, but you kind of hinted at it wasn't as big as a thing here, at least with you and your friends. And so what was that like?
Well, okay, here we didn't really feel it in going to high school and things like that. My freshman and sophomore year in Salinas at North Salinas High, basically I can only remember one African American. And they were there about 1 year and then they were gone. I mean, it wasn't that there was any segregation. If they were in the neighborhood, they would have gone to the school. They just weren't in the neighborhood. And these are all the kind of new houses. I mean, this is right next to the farms. I mean, these are tract houses, but you walk out your back door and walk a half a block, and there's the strawberry fields. I mean, the neighborhood was growing up new houses, but with still patches of farms of any kind of, well, Salinas is called the salad bowl of the world at one time. So they had all kind of, so everybody was there, but in our neighborhood, North Salinas, which had buses come in with people, It was just there was no segregation because they weren't there.
There was nothing
There weren't
to
your
segregate.
neighbor, there was nothing to segregate. We never thought about it. To us, and when the other African American was there, hey, he was still a person. That's it. We never even thought of all this kind of stuff. And my parents are from the South,
Yeah.
so but it never crossed my mind.
Did they think that?
I
way?
don't know.
Were they on the side of the South at that point?
I don't know. They were just, I have no idea what they were thinking because I can't really say I sat next. They were never in my class. I just passed them in the hallway.
No, I meant your parents.
Oh, my
Like,
parents?
were
No,
they-
my mother was. No. Well, my father. I've come to through the years and figured out he's a racist.
Yeah.
Okay, my mother was not. And seeing how my father was in the service, my mother was doing most of the raising.
Right.
My mother thought everybody was equal, and there's no reason to think this way, and yet she's from Oklahoma. And she thought everybody was equal, and her friends later, doing it on the military basis, naturally you have all kinds of races. When we started to end up living on military basis, she didn't care. People were people. And that's where I learned my attitude. People were people. And racism just didn't cross our mind. And, my best friend when I actually went in the Navy was an African American. I never thought about his race. He just happened to be African American. He was a great guy.
Yeah. We'll get to your Navy experience in a second. But the other big thing that happened probably... What year did you graduate?
64.
So probably your junior year or late senior. So, no, junior. Was JFK assassination. Do you remember? Because they always say everyone remembers exactly where they were when they heard that news. Do you actually remember exactly
Yes,
where
I
you
was
were?
in my chemistry class.
Yeah.
And the news came over, and the silence that went through the whole place was, deafening, or however you want to say it. There was complete silence. People, a high school, which was Bolsa Grande at the time, just completely went silent. Because this was a charismatic, I'm not saying the word right, charismatic person who basically all students liked. He talked about being yourself, being free and standing up, and then all of a sudden somebody took his life. There was complete shock in the school.
Yeah. Was now, other than, actually I can't think of a more recent president than Kennedy that was, obviously I didn't live through Kennedy, but from the things I read about him, from the reading, understanding history at that time, that was pretty unifying. It's pretty popular, like Democrat, Republican. Do you remember?
Yeah, as far as I can tell, most people liked him. He was a former military man. They didn't really care. That, of course, back then the big thing, he's a Catholic. How can you vote for a Catholic? Of course, I wasn't voting at the time. I was still too young to vote. People had these strange things throughout life why they don't vote for something.
So it was only
That's
vote for a Protestant? Was that?
Yeah, that's if you look through history until he was elected, that is what happened. No
Wow.
Catholic ever got voted in until Kennedy.
No.
And which is strange to me. Why were people making those judgments?
Actually, as I think about it, I don't think any Catholic has been president since. Unless I'm wrong.
Yeah, I don't remember.
Yeah, I can't think of one.
Yeah.
So, you graduated in 64. What did you do right out of high school?
Well, right out of high school, I ended up going over to Japan and went to. My father was transferred to Tokyo, Yokohama, actually, military, and that his ship sailed out of there. So my mother went. So if I wanted to go to college, didn't have the money to pay or a job to go to college, so I went there with them and lived there in Yokohama. And Yokosuka was the name of the city we lived in. Yokohama was the base he was out of. And went to college in Tokyo. Catholic college, actually. Of course, we went at night because that's when they taught in English.
Makes sense. How many years did you go to college?
Well, I went to college probably 3 semesters. It covered about 2 years because I'd come back during the summer one time, then I went back, and then I came back the next summer and got my draft notice. And
that brings up an interesting point. How did you end up getting drafted, Dad?
well, I got drafted because my sister would get the mail here in the United States and for my deferment, but she didn't bother to send it on to me, so I could not fill out and get my college deferment. So
it was a legal way to say, hey, I'm going to school, pick someone else.
Yeah.
It wasn't draft dodging, it wasn't...
if you were going to college and trying to improve yourself, they didn't draft you. You could...
Only the ones not improving themselves.
Yes.
The ones just...
And you had to be passing your courses. You can't be flunking in school.
So, you basically ended up drafted because of a issue with your sister.
Yeah, I didn't know they were looking for me. And then I got the notice that says you got something like 10 days to show up to the Army base or recruitment center.
So, now at the time, the draft, everyone, and I mean everyone, went into the Army. You weren't drafted into anything else. You were drafted into the Army.
Correct.
But how did you end up in the Navy?
Well, my father just happened to be back in the States. He was still stationed in Japan, but he was back visiting in the States. And he just walked me down. We just drove down to the Navy recruitment office and filled out the papers real quick. See, I received my draft notice on July 13th.
Oh.
That's a famous day. You want to hear all that story for July 13th?
Sure. July 13th, what year?
1966.
July 13th.
And a Friday.
Friday, July 13th, 1966.
Okay. That day, my friend and I took our girlfriends and we went down to the beach, down to Newport, and we were running around, and first I cut the bottom of my foot on the rocks, peeled the skin back, and then not wanting to go home, leave just because of that, I eventually started to go into the water again, just hopping on one foot.
So let me stop you and let's get clear. You cut your foot.
Correct.
Completely bleeding, literally continuously bleeding.
Yeah.
You went back into an ocean.
Yes.
That is salt water.
Correct. I did put my foot in there tenderly to see if it would burn or anything. It didn't.
It didn't.
Did
that not happen?
I have no idea, but let's see, I guess I was 20 years old at that time. Who feels pain at 20? Anyway, I'm hopping around on one foot and I'm trying to get to deep enough water so I can just swim. And that last step turned out to be I stepped on a manta ray.
Oh.
Who politely put his tail right into the top of my other foot.
Oh, awesome. So now you have...
So I can't really stand up on anything at that time. And at that time, of course, I had been working back here, and I had my car. My friend decided, being a son of a military man, and being there was a Marine base close by, we went to that doctor's there. So my friend is flying down the road, and I politely told him, "It's my car, slow it down, we don't need to go so fast." Yeah. And
so were you, even though you cut your foot and you kept going, were you trying to impress the girl?
No, I just happened to like being in the water. I didn't want to go home. Didn't want to call it even just because we just got there. We hadn't been there 30 minutes. I didn't think.
Because you were going into the service soon, right? Isn't that what?
No, I didn't know about it at that time.
Oh, you didn't.
See, that's the beginning of the day.
So that's you remember the day. This all happens, then you find out?
That particular day. Yeah, so we go there, and we pull into the Marine base, and go into doctors and all that kind of stuff. And, of course, the girls are still in bikinis, so we had the doctors and people said politely, go back and grab some more clothes to cover up because the Marines can't concentrate on their work. Yeah, so I get that, and we're going through there, and then they drive me home, and there is my father with my draft notice saying you have 10 days to report to the Army.
So you guys decided, well, so you basically see the draft notice, decide, I don't want to go in the Army because, 1960, what year was this?
66.
66. How long had Vietnam been happening at that point?
Couple years, yeah.
So a couple years.
They were sending people to Vietnam pretty regularly.
And how quickly were they coming back not alive?
Well, I don't know how quickly. A lot of them were doing that. Well, I wear glasses and did at that time. I just figured, okay, it's really not fun to run around in the mud with glasses and a gun.
Right.
But I also figured I could have a better chance of outswimming a shark, because, as you know, I'm a swimmer.
Yeah.
Than dodging bullets. So I said, okay, let's get into the Navy. And so I ended up in the Navy.
So it was basically to avoid the Army.
Going to the Army, yes. See, my father was Navy, so I never thought about being in the Army. My dream was being a Navy pilot anyway, which I didn't become. But.
I just mean, bringing up, how quickly they came back not alive was... Because from my general understanding of the timing, it didn't start out as bad as it got. It wasn't,
Correct.
instant, crap going wrong, kind of, we shouldn't be here. But at what point did, at least in your recollection, did it just become basically hell on Earth, as far as...
Oh, yeah, it became hell for the people there. I made 3 tours in Nam, but it was on a ship off the coast, on an aircraft carrier. So the people on land, it became hell kind of quick, because we went there at first just as advisors, just to try to help these people, because we were... At one time, you have to understand, the French were there too. But when they decided everybody was going to leave, the French, and I don't know if any other country, but the French were the big ones, all packed up and left overnight. And of course the U.S. did do that, so they were still there. So when the fighting started picking up, it just got bigger and bigger. And I mean, personally, if you want, the problem with the Vietnam War and most of the wars since is we don't fight to win. Because they could run across the line to another country, sit there and take vacations, while still bombing us in Vietnam. I don't quite go for that. Why should they be up there?
Right.
Yeah, if you're going to fight a war, you fight to win. If you're not going to fight to win, stay home.
But from a more, job-orientated, stance, how was it being in the Navy?
Actually, the Navy was fine. I went through boot camp, qualified for almost everything. And then when I got on the ship, it said, hey, somehow my designation said, best suited to be an architect. So when I got on the ship, they looked at me and said, an architect. Well, if you can design to build something, we'll put you in ordnance so you can blow it up. So,
Ordnance?
Bombs, rockets, missiles, that kind of stuff.
Building?
Well, basically, we just assembled them and set them up on the plane.
So basically,
built was at a factory here in the U.S.
Came with a set of instructions. You had to be told how to piece that together.
Well, actually, it taught you how to piece it together. You
Right.
have to look at the instructions.
Right. Hopefully, after a while, so you had to be taught how to piece things together.
Right.
We'll get back to actual Navy experience, but you essentially were taught how to put together a nuclear bomb, correct?
Yes.
At least in pieces, not necessarily the chemicals within, but in pieces.
Yeah, we were taught. I went to one of the easiest schools I've ever been to, because there was no homework. You walked in the gate, they searched you, then you got your pad and paper while you're inside to take notes. You did the studies and everything else. And then
Be careful what you reveal here.
Then when you walk out, they search you again.
Yeah.
So there's never any homework. That's why I call it one of the easiest classes I ever went. Luckily, the weapons were never used.
Right.
But
weren't you... At least maybe you told this story to a young child to kind of make life sound more thrilling, but weren't you, after the military, weren't you kind of checked up on You know.
Yeah, I have a, yeah, okay, yeah, you know, you naturally, when you have that ability to, because it's not something you open a book to do, it's something
Right.
you know. It's drilled into your head, you know it for life, basically.
So, even after the military, they quote unquote checked up on you.
Sure. I mean, not, you know.
I know it's been years, but
It's been years, they don't do it anymore. I mean, they figure you forget, but, yeah, naturally, they don't want you to, they keep track to see if you're going to go teach somebody else to do it, because, I mean, I know everybody talks about going to the website and figuring out, because it's on the web, how to build one. There's a difference between what they build there and what I'm talking about.
Right.
They make just dirty bombs. I have never read anything on the web, so I don't know. But I know originally it was just a bunch of dirty bombs that blow up, you know, miles square. I'm talking about things that eliminate, you know,
50 square miles.
Yeah, the stuff they dropped on in Japan, those 2 bombs. We worked with stuff with a lot bigger than those. So there's a whole lot of difference.
Because I remember very distinctly as a kid. I don't remember what age you first told me that, but I do very much remember telling my friends, at least late elementary school, like, yeah, my dad's so awesome, the military has to check up on him, make sure he's not doing anything, like, criminal with his secret spy knowledge.
Yeah. Well, I used to, in later years, I met these people who were actually engineers over here at McDonald's, and they were always worried about the black helicopters watching them. I'm going, are you people crazy?
But kind of jumping back to just overall Navy experience, I mean, what was that like? Was it something you obviously didn't re-enlist when your time was up?
No.
But was there a particular reason why not? Or
Well, as I told them when they asked me to re-enlist, because they ask everybody, I said I put me in and I'm putting me out. Basically, I didn't see it as a career, but if you're not doing anything, if you don't have anything set thing, military is a good way to get discipline, and you can also get schooling.
Yeah.
Now, naturally, what I went through is not exactly a trade I can go out and do.
no, you can't just build nuclear bombs. There's
There's a lot of engineering part to it that comes along, and structural things I couldn't actually do. But the military, it had its good points too. One, you end up working like a team. You weren't, even though we weren't necessary in the life or death of what a ground person goes through.
Yeah, someone.
But our life, we've got airplanes flying on and off an aircraft carrier with bombs, and we got fuel that can go up anytime. And you can read a lot of things about accidents on a plane an aircraft carrier where it's burning.
Did you ever have any like major accidents?
Well, I remember one time we were setting down, and of course, the emergency goes, crash takes place, and my job is, if there is a big fire is throw the bombs overside, get rid of them so they don't blow up.
Not the bombs that were on the crashing plane, but the bombs that you
That
have
we
stored.
Yeah, that are setting on the deck, ready to go. It's the bombs setting on the deck, ready to go onto planes that I have to get rid of. The ones way down the storage, you don't try to bring them up.
Right.
But so one time we came running up to where I was supposed to be during this emergency, opened the door, and it was solid smoke. You couldn't see 2 feet in front of you. Luckily, it turned out to be mostly smoke and not very little fire. But of course, that was after we heard, like the Forrestal had a big fire plane and burned up, went back for a year to dry dock. We had been reading all this, so we're naturally saying, uh-oh, we're in trouble now. And it really just turned out to be mostly smoke. But we were lined up, we had all the bombs sitting right on the edge, and all I had to do was pick them up and start tossing them. And of course, it's not by hand I'm picking them up, they're on bomb racks, so I just tilt it over and let them go in the ocean. And, don't pick up 250, 500 pounds.
You weren't that strong at 20, 21?
No.
What was it? Now, you finished your time in the Navy 69? 4
years. Yeah. 69,
It
yeah.
would be 70. It would be 4 years. You went in at 66, right?
Yeah, I guess it could be 70. I don't remember the time I got out. I got out a few months early because we
Okay.
were back and they're,
No point in sending you again.
they weren't going to send me again, so.
And I know that wasn't the war didn't end till 73.
73, something like that, yeah.
So I know, what was it like for you coming home from Vietnam? What was
Each time or the final?
just like the final? I mean, if they're different.
They are different. When you're still in the service, you come home. Actually, we were not particularly respected. Even on our own base, they naturally have the bars in there and things. And if you're sitting there, going on with your friends, these people are, even in there, there's people that are saying, "Oh, you rotten people, you weren't to Vietnam." Of course, they're sitting with sailors who are stationed right there. Okay, we're all sailors. We just had a different job than they did.
Yeah.
But yeah, because we were up in San Francisco.
Right.
So that's where I was home ported at Alameda across from San Francisco. So yeah, and military didn't come up too much, with too much respect for the military.
Even within its own ranks.
Within it, on the base. It wasn't, it was civilians who were there with other military people that had no respect for the guys who went to Vietnam, which seemed awful strange. He's a Navy guy, I'm a Navy guy. His job may be sitting at a desk here, but he's still supporting me.
Right.
So,
But what about when you were finally done?
when I was done, I really didn't have any. When I moved back down here, nobody gave me a hard time. When I moved back from San Francisco, came back down to Southern California.
Was it just a simple fact that they didn't
Simple fact.
know?
No, you could tell military haircut real easy. You remember that was the time everybody wanted to be Beatles and long hair hippies.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Even though hippies actually had their funerals in 1969, so there is no more hippies. They had a coffin and everything and threw it off a cliff in San Francisco.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been to Hayton Ashbury.
It's true. You were basically in and out of San Francisco at the time of
Yeah.
hippies, the big
Hayton
hippie.
Ashbury. Hayton Ashbury at first was okay. It was basically hippies. It soon became drug addicts. Because hippies
They don't write that in the history books.
hippies weren't necessarily drug addicts.
No.
And then all the drug addicts took over to live that style. So you do have to give the original hippies some respect. They just didn't believe in war and all that, but they were non-violent, they were non-druggies, the ones that I bet and Hayden Ashbury.
Right.
Of course, the next time around it was like a drug center.
So overall, coming home and done out of the military, it wasn't, because I read stuff and people getting spit on or basically getting in fights.
No, that probably took place around the Bay Area. My friend and I, actually, as I mentioned, an African American friend of mine in the Navy, he and I went up to Cal Berkeley, which of course is a liberal college whatsoever. They had marches against the war every single afternoon.
I've never heard of Berkeley being a liberal school ever.
But so he and I went up there just strolling around. We had we had civilian clothes on, but we have military haircuts and military shoes. So you could really tell. But luckily, when we nonchalantly ended up there, because we were just seeing the sights and catching a bus here and catching a bus there, and that's where we ended up. And we were on campus, and I'd sit there, and it was spring break, luckily for us.
Oh, yeah.
And the people there were just nice and peaceful. They didn't, I'm sure they could tell we were military, but they didn't bother us. So.
We'll skip ahead a few years. And you eventually married my mom. When did you guys get married? 73, wasn't it?
Yes. No, 74.
74. So, about 4 years after the military. And I'm just going to move this story along for the point of just making things simple. You marry, you have my brother, He's born in 75. I'm born in 77. You and my mom get a divorce somewhere around 80? No.
No.
79?
No. Yeah, it's probably 79 when it's finalized.
And just as a point of interest, I know divorce for a lot of people is always a tricky subject, and especially in the church and Christian communities and stuff like that. And I'll take some of the heat off, and I'll explain. You guys basically got divorced because my mom's mental illness and her basically disability of being able to take care of children and herself at the same time. It wasn't couldn't work it out, couldn't be in love. And I think it was for that reason I would go to camps and stuff, junior high age, and the preacher would be asking, like, who's from a divorce or who's from a broken home? And I would never raise my hand because I didn't grow up with parents fighting. Like, it never felt broken to me. It just felt like, and plus it happened to me so young. I was 2. So that's from, you don't really remember stuff from the ages. Most kids don't really hold on to memories until they're about 5. So, and plus you guys didn't break up for those reasons. So I never equated it with being, from this turmoiled home, of just fighting constantly. It was just, and I think even at an early age, I think at least by the time I was 10, I knew my mom was, probably even earlier, I think I knew my mom was sick, and it wasn't out of, it wasn't out of she didn't want to be with us. I never ever felt that about my mom. But I say all that to kind of move ahead in the story, and not for you to necessarily talk about divorce, but what was it like? Because we ended up being with you, and what was it like being a single parent? Or what was the hardest thing about being a single parent?
The hardest thing, trying to juggle all the movements and things you have to do as a family with just one person leading. To me, it was just another step in life. As you said, I didn't view the divorce as something that was terrible took place. It was actually your mother and I deciding that because of her disabilities, it would be safer. She did it for you guys. She didn't do it to get away from me. She did it because she wanted to protect her kids. Yeah. And she thought it would be better because, she'd really get into the depression and things. So for me, it was just a step, another job, another part of my life. I just took off and just started doing it. Of course, you have to look for babysitters more often for what kind of job. And you have less security, the ability to say, okay, I don't like this, I need to move on to a different job. That did come up where I wouldn't quit a job because I didn't like it anymore, mainly because I had to have the income to support kids, just like all single men are women in life. They get to the point you can't just walk away. You have 2 other people you have to put a roof on and food on the table for. Right. If it's just you can jump in a car and go any place you want.
Yeah. So basically you had to stick things out.
Right.
Even though they weren't maybe your hopes and dreams. I think there's something to be said, just, as a preschool teacher for the past 6 years, I've seen all kinds of parents and all kinds of kids, and it's still kind of, I never try to judge parents and their situation, but sometimes it's hard it's hard to pretend like you don't notice patterns. It's hard to pretend like, because I only say it because you talked about just kind of working towards doing things for your kids, And sometimes it just seems in this day like there's just too many people not kind of being willing to sacrifice, whether it's time or their own aspirations for spending time with their kids. And I know I greatly appreciated everything and just the time and not, because it never felt to me like you regretted anything. Like it never ever. And I've seen parents that I can tell that they make when they're upset or when they're embarrassed in public by their kids. I've seen some pretty, just work between being a preschool teacher and working at Target. I have seen countless families, and I have seen parents get embarrassed by their kids, and you can tell, just the things they've said to them, you can tell they're just basically, without saying the words, "I regret having you," they're literally telling kids, "I regret having you." They don't say it in those words, but just their overreaction, and it's just, I never felt that from you. I never felt like our existence was a burden.
Well, basically, I don't know when I started feeling this way. I looked at it, I had two sons. They were children of God that He gave me. That tells me that God loves me, and He trusted me to raise two of His children. And I had the joy of being there a lot to see almost everything you've ever done. I remember one time, I don't know, you or Richie said, you show up to everything, every practice, every place. As a parent, you only get one chance to spend the time with you. Everybody says you got to spend quality time. Well, unfortunately, the truth is you have to give quantity of time to find the quality. The quality is going to last 1 minute. When your child finally wants to say something important that day, to ask you a question, and it's going to be on his timing, not your timing. So naturally, I went to work and came home and spent time here, because I also knew that once you guys were raised and taken care of yourself, I still had another 20, 30 years to go after any dream I want.
Right. Did people ever question your choices as a parent? And I don't mean like question your being a single parent or getting a divorce or never remarrying or anything like that. I just mean how you parented us. Did anyone ever question that?
They never questioned it because you, Richie, and I talked a lot. Sometimes loudly, sometimes softly, but we always communicated. That's when the gift came out between us, even though I don't consider myself a good communicator. But I was there for you to communicate with. And you guys would communicate, and we enjoyed the communication. It got loud in this house at times, but we communicated, and we understood each other. We had a closeness. I mean, as you know, like, I guess Richie's senior year or your sophomore year, and I went to Chicago to see a friend and things.
Mm-hmm.
I left you alone, and yet the parents let you have kids over here, your friends over here, knowing I wouldn't be here. So to me, that said the parents trusted me that I've raised my kids correctly to make the correct judgment when they're in their home alone with their friends. So no parent ever said, because I've had leaders at the church and things, and psychologists and ministers say, there's no doubt about your kids. Your sons are not afraid to speak their mind. They're not. They're secure, and basically, I think you can teach a child right from wrong. That's all you can do is teach him which path he take is his choice. But if you want to take him the right direction, you got to be there showing the right direction every single day, because you do one bad thing, it's going to take 100 good things to override the one bad. Now, so it's a way of life you choose. And no parent, nobody ever asked me, said
Well, I
anything
kinda
about my
re-
parenting
I-
because they thought it was strange I didn't have curfews for you guys.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff I mean. Just thought you were
No.
no one.
They thought it was strange when they heard when I told people I didn't have curfews. And I think the strange thing is because they had curfews and restrictions for their kids, but we grew up talking forever,
Yeah.
and we built a trust. And as you know, if you were going someplace, you told me, and that's where you went. When you changed and everybody was going somewhere else, you called and told me. It wasn't you went someplace else and didn't let me know. You always let me know. I always knew where you and Richie were and what you were doing. And when it was a trust we built, and a trust every parent should have with their kids. But I had that with my mother, so it wasn't something I invented.
Right.
My mother gave me, because she's the one who raised it more than my father. So my mother gave me that trust. I didn't have a curfew.
Yeah.
I don't remember ever having a curfew. Just like you never had a curfew. It just didn't serve the purpose. If you're honest with each other, I mean, as I told, I know I told Richie, I don't know if it says it, the worst thing you can ever do to me is lie.
Yeah.
Never lie to me. And basically, I can't recall you guys ever having big lies. You try to fib once in a while, and you figured out that's stupid.
Yeah, when you kind of learn that the person who you're talking with is good at words, and that they'll pull apart your story and and they'll figure it out. I don't think we ever lied big, but it was mostly who left a mess or who left the TV on or who did something to the computer. It was never like sneaking out and having to lie about it. It was never anything like that. But no one ever questioned you about, like, because I remember small moments, no one ever questioned you about, like, how I showed up dressed for church or wearing a hat to church. No one ever...
No, they questioned you about that, but they never... Most people, I don't know what kind of people, how people look at me, look at me, but most people never came up to challenge me on what I did. Because they knew I spent a lot of time with you. It's something they didn't bother to match in their lives. So they were short. They can't say too much to me when they don't spend the time I spent.
Yeah. Well, I just know that there were situations like the hat thing I just mentioned. I know the person who came up to me about wearing a hat in church when I was like 16 years old, they basically told me they were going to go talk to you.
He never talked to me.
Oh, really?
No, he wouldn't have. No, that particular person would not have the courage to do it.
Interesting. Moving on. How did having kids change you? You kind of talked about that, but how did it change? Did it change any perspective?
Well, because, I never, growing up as a kid, I never thought, let's get married and have kids. I mean, that wasn't something you thought of to me. It was, what am I going to do for my career? What am I going to do this? Things like that. When you two came along and the situation took place, it was just an evolution.
Yeah.
It was just something that came up part of your life that you just got added to your life, and you went. It wasn't that I want to have kids and all that. I don't. Maybe women think that way, but I honestly did not think of having kids and how I was going to do this for them when I raised them and how I was going to do that. I'm sorry. When I had kids, it was learn by the seat of your pants. There's nothing. I had no plans about how to do it. So it just came from the fact of how I was taught by my mother. Just be there, talk to them, and when they're ready to talk, be there. But you have to have your own life too. I mean, it's just, as you know, this helped run the singles at a couple different churches. So, yeah, I had a life and everything. I never got remarried because, one of the things I think, basically, when you're a single parent, your first job is to finish raising your kids. Bringing in another family is not always good. But I can also understand if you find somebody. If God puts the right person in front of you, you should get married. For me, it just never happened.
Was divorce ever an awkward thing among a church family that you were connected to when it happened? Was it ever?
No,
No.
no. There was too many divorces in the world going on that it didn't. Feel
Didn't have
awkward.
time to worry about yours.
I mean, I must admit. I mean, if you want to talk about divorce, that is one thing I feel as a failure, not being married to the same person from the beginning.
No.
I couldn't. As you can probably say, I ran my own business. I always, most of the time, whatever job I had, I was out on my own doing my thing. So I was always in control, even though I don't think I'm a control person. I don't like to control other people.
Yeah.
But, so not being able to accomplish a long, steady marriage, it was somewhat as a failure to myself.
Even though the reasons behind...
I understand the reasons.
Yeah.
And I understand, and she, we got separated for a very good reason. She loved you guys, and she thought it was best. And I just got to the point where I couldn't protect you and protect her. I just didn't have enough of me to spread between three. Mm-hmm. And I just let it happen.
And just as a kind of side note for anyone who is listening, and we're talking about my mom, and she's not here, and her story, and while I know every person's story is their own and their journey is their own, I do have permission. I've gotten permission from my mom at different times to share her side of this story. I've talked about my mom's battle with mental illness in teaching youth kids. Over the past 15 years I've been doing youth ministry. So if it feels awkward, don't feel too bad. Even though she won't hear this, my mom does know that I openly talk about her struggle. There are aspects of it that I purposely leave out because there are parts of the story that are just hers that don't pertain to me as a kid. But nothing we've talked about here has broken any of that. So, you mentioned a little bit ago that arguments in our house got heated. Would you say most of those arguments were family discussions or political in nature? Like if you had to put a percentage on that,
most of it would probably be political. It wasn't that the three of us didn't get along and things. It was probably other things outside the family that we'd get in discussions with.
Yeah, I would almost say it was half and half. Like it pretty much was 50-50 split down the middle of just brothers fighting because one wants to watch a show that the other one doesn't, and fighting with you because I don't want to clean my room now. I want to wait 5 hours and clean it later. But then, especially junior high on, I know some of them were very political in nature, and not political in like who to vote for or what policies. They really were more philosophical and etiquette orientated.
Right, yeah.
I remember one distinct, I basically decided if I ever, and for no reason, not that I would ever in my life ever meet the President of the United States, I decided I would never call him Mr. President. I would call him by his name. I just up and decided, I remember this very distinctly, I don't care, who's he? He's no one special. I'll call him by his name, whatever. This is 90s, so it probably was either George Bush or Bill Clinton, depending on the year. But and so it wasn't like political, but they were etiquette oriented. Some of them were political, because I know we talked with Richie. I talked about everything from gun control to the death penalty to, actually those were usually it, or even what military actions people should take or your government should take, and I'll just say it, I'll just ask this question even though I know the answer, and it's totally egotistical, but was there ever an issue that I changed your mind on?
The death penalty, actually. I decided to be a death penalty is fine at one time. Then I decided, okay, why should we go to what they did and kill? I mean, life imprisonment is a lot worse than death. You know, a lot of people say, well, how can that be? Well, you're in a cage for the rest of your life.
It is. It is arguably a worse punishment.
Yeah.
I mean, people always joke about prison. Oh, you get 3 squares a day, you get outside time, and there's probably cable, and there's probably now Netflix, and no prison, no big deal. No, you're pretty much in a small, tiny cell, and and you don't get any freedom. No, it sucks.
Yeah. So
especially people on death row, like they get even less stuff.
yeah, because I look at it this way, because if there's somewhere along the line, this is the first. Because I consider most people, 99% of the people, 99.9% of the people convicted of murder or something like that, who are set up for death penalty probably deserve it. But that 0.1%, whoever that one person out of 1,000, if we can save their life, it's worth just putting the rest of them and spending the money. It's a lot. Everybody says it's more expensive to kill someone. I don't understand that. Feeding these people is over, $50,000 a year to take care of each.
Oh yeah, it's
prisoner.
arguably cheaper to kill them.
Yeah, so I don't understand. A lot of them say it's more expensive to do the death penalty. I don't understand that part, but like you convinced me, that one person out of 1,000 deserves the chance to make it, to get out.
And it was a combination of that point versus I think it's a worse punishment to put someone in prison for eternity. There's the side of it as a Christian, especially because I argued most of these points from a Christian standpoint of there has to be a moment of redemption. Not every person on death row is Hitler. None of them are. But none of them are so... the vast majority of them are not psychopathic serial killers. And so to offer no amount of redemption, possibility for redemption, I just don't think it's the Christian way. I don't think it's Christ-like to offer no chance of forgiveness. And yes, I know they can get forgiven of their sin and still do their time and still be put to death. I get it, but I get it from a theological standpoint, but I could never in good conscience support that idea. And I'm one of the few Christians who sides with anti-death penalty people. And in high school I remember the common complaint about kids or about Christians was, you guys say you're so pro-life, but yet you're for the death penalty. And I go, well, actually, you are talking to the wrong one, because I am not. So, and there are verses that I would pull from the Bible of not repaying evil for evil. And that is something I think that was for me, and I was reading that as just I was reading my Bible. I didn't come out of a research thing. I was just reading it, and I realized, wow, that's kind of exactly what I feel like the death penalty is. It's this, you hurt me, so I'm going to hurt you way of approaching justice. And I just have never felt okay with that. And look, at the same time, well, I don't want to take it so far to say that, if someone like Hitler or, Charles Manson, someone in those realms was up to, in the death penalty, would I fight it so much? Would I, and you'll never find me on a picket line protesting to save someone. But I think as just a theological standpoint, I just can't fully support it and be all like, yeah, the death penalty, woo! Like, it's one of those things, it's kind of the same thing what happened with Bin Laden. Like, I was glad that they caught and Bin Laden, was dead. I was more happy that he essentially couldn't do any more harm to anyone.
Right.
But I wasn't like, yay, he's dead. And there's a difference between, I am glad that when good wins over evil, I am not satisfied when a soul had to suffer and not essentially come to Christ. That doesn't please me. I'm like, and that's where I would conflict with people of like, yay, Bin Laden's dead, and running around in the streets and like, yay. Yeah. And when we act like that, I just, it's hard. It's not, I don't think it's the, we can be happy or it pleases God, I think, when good
evil is removed.
When evil is removed, but I don't think that it pleases him. And it says, I wish I knew it off the top of my head because it would serve a better point, but it does say that God does mourn when people pass and they don't get a chance to know him, so yeah. So we're kind of about out of time. We're right at just over an hour. What advice would you give the next generation or yeah? Well, next generation would be my generation essentially, but I don't know, the kids maybe graduating, I'd probably be all the same. But what advice do you give?
The biggest advice I give, basically get outside. Too many people are doing the electronic stuff, they're on their computers all the time, and they're saying, well, yeah, I'm communicating, I'm emailing, I'm hashtag, I forgot all the terms.
Hashtag.
Yeah. Texting, all this stuff. Well, okay, you're doing that, but you're not looking face to face. There's a difference. I mean, when the internet and all that came on, the amount of phoniness of people who were online shocked me. They would say things and then you find out a little later, this is a fantasy world they're living in. They're not telling you the truth.
No.
It's not so. You can't communicate. You can't relate to somebody who's always going to give you the line that's not true. Be yourself, because guess what? I don't care who you are. There's a beautiful person in there. And you need to show that person face to face with others. And one, you need the physical activity, because as I being 68 and things, you need to keep up your physical activity or you're going to have a lot more trouble than I have.
Yeah.
At my age. If you don't go out and do things, hike, walk, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything major, but I don't care if you're 30, 40 years old and used to play softball, go back and play softball. Do something. Yeah, but do it with the people, because is a way you eliminate a lot of hatred. You see this person.
Right. If
they're different religion, color, ethnic, whatever, right. We're all the same. I mean, America has an exceptionalism, which is great because we allow it a lot more, where other countries don't get allowed this freedom. But the people, other than the leaders in any country, forget all leaders, here or any other country, all the other people would like each other if they got to know each other. Okay? Yeah. The Palestinians living in Palestine, and people in Israel, if you met them straight, just got together in a park every day for 6 months, you'd forget what they did. You going out there having fun and enjoying your life, sharing the meals, learning different foods from each country. And of course, me saying that because I don't really try different foods too well. But you're going to learn that they are you. And if you want to cut down the violence in the world and the war and the hatred, that's how you have to do it. You have to meet them. You can't set them you can't text them. You can't send an email. You can't send a blog. You have to meet people, because that's what Jesus did. Very simple. He went out and met the people, good people, bad people, whatever. He looked them in the eye. That's what all the rest of us have to do. And I don't care if you're a Christian or not. You need to look at people. You need to look them in the eye and sit down and have a conversation about anything in the world. Baseball, soccer.
Yeah. So you hear that, everyone? Go outside. I mean, after you listen to this podcast on your laptop or your iPhone, or after that, like when the show's done, then go outside. Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. In the end, I don't fall on the side of technology is to blame for our inability to communicate kind of side of the argument, but I think it allows us to do two things, like you mentioned. Yeah, great, we can communicate more, quicker. You know, the world is a lot smaller now as far as information goes, but it's also more diluted because everyone gets their hand in the pot, as well as, you know, people can hide themselves a whole lot easier. Yeah.
Let me interject here. As you said, the world communicates everything. The world is smaller. Also, you have to understand, staying in that small world, you're creating more pressure on you, on yourselves. If you go out and meet people, it doesn't have. I mean, you can do indoor sports or indoor activities. If you meet people, you're isolating down into one or two people at a time. That'll relieve some of the pressure you get from all these texting, all this news that it bombards you 24 hours a day. You got to let some of that go. You can't do anything about it. But you can talk to your neighbor. You can pick up the little kid who falls down and brush them off. You can do those little things. And those little things can't be done if you're sitting on a computer. Which, of course, it doesn't matter if you're 2 or 3 hours on the computer, fine, and only an hour outside. But remember, your greatest source of energy happens to be the sun. Your body turns that into the great energy for you to be active.
Just like Superman. So go outside, kids. You can be Superman. That's our lesson today. Go outside and you can be Superman. All right, listen to this. All right, I'd like to thank my guest, Richard Vest, my dad, for hanging out with me for an hour and 7 minutes. And I'd like to thank you for listening for an hour and 7 minutes. And this song that you're listening to is called Into Your Veins by the great Denver, Colorado band Five Iron Frenzy. It is off their newest album, Engine of a Million Plots. You should go pick it up. It's a really good record. So until next time, my friends, peace.